Steve Jones from Newsmag Renfrew. Country music artist Jason Aldean is in hot water recently with the release of a track called Try That in a Small Town. Now, as a result of this release, numerous celebrities, whether from the music industry or from the broader entertainment industries, have leveled criticism at Aldean for this production, saying that the music or the song and the video promote violence, they promote gun use, they promote racism and vigilantism in society. I'm not a big country fan, so I can't really say that I follow Jason Aldean very closely. But even though I'm not a country fan, I can certainly appreciate the quality of the music of the song. It's a catchy little number. I don't have any problem with the music of it, and I'm not sure if I have a problem with the lyrics and the messaging of it either, owing to the fact that people and artists have the right to express themselves so long as they don't cause harm. And I think some of the criticism that has been sent Aldean's way has a little bit to do with the potential of such videos to cause harm in society, especially if influential people looking up to a country music artist, one of the premier country music artists in the industry, looking up to his work and perhaps taking it as motivation to do some of the things that critics allege are in the songs. Like I said, I think it's a good song. I can see some of the merit in some of the criticism, but I honestly don't think that the artist here is guilty of all of the things that he's being criticized for. In fact, I don't know if he's guilty of any or many of the things that some of the critics are throwing his way. But he's being blamed for it nevertheless. And usually I'm somebody that jumps all over this sort of thing. So I thought, since there was sort of an uproar around this song, I mean, I saw it on CNN, I've seen it being showcased on various newscasts. It's obviously a big deal in society, so I thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to get all dressed up and I'm going to weigh in on it, for better or for worse, just because. Now, you know what? Like I said, I'm not a country fan, but that doesn't preclude me from having an opinion. It also doesn't preclude me from being neutral and fair, as much as sometimes I struggle with that. I'm going to make my best effort to be that way here today. So that's a lot coming from me, because I know that Aldean is a heavy-duty right-wing conservative guy. I know he's a Trump loyalist. I know that he is a regular at the Mar-a-Lago resort down in Florida, where he regularly attends and kisses the ring of the king. So I mean, that right there is usually enough to get a guy like him in my bad books. But I'm not here to really judge the guy on his politics. I'm not really here to judge the guy at all. I'm just here to offer an opinion about the song, and not necessarily the political bent of the artist. So it's about a song. It's not about the man's politics. So the basic premise behind the song is a lot of the violence that took place in the United States, especially after the George Floyd incident, where a black citizen was killed or died in police custody amidst allegations of police brutality and all that sort of thing. And that led to a great big explosion, really, of the Black Lives Matter movement, and other movements that could characterize themselves as anti-police. So I think we all recall, this was 2 or 3 summers ago, where there were massive protests in larger American cities, and a lot of these protests sort of crossed the line into anarchy and chaos and violence and looting, all of that sort of thing. And there's no doubt about it, and Aldean shows this in his video, that there was a strong influence of left-wing activism taking place at these demonstrations. Left-wing agitators, just like right-wing agitators, usually find a reason to show up and take cover under somebody else's protest, and this is where they do their things to promote anarchy and promote their dissatisfaction, in fact their outright hatred, really, of police. And so Aldean was sort of talking about this when he invokes images of looting, he invokes images of people stomping on the flag and setting it on fire, jumping up and down on police cars. He mentions people, as he said, cussing out cops and spitting in their face. And all of that stuff, it's hard to disagree with Aldean that stuff is just not something that we want to see in any kind of society that's worth living in. But we have to understand that some of that, well, not some, but a good degree of that violence was perpetrated by people with a political agenda, in this case the far left. I am no bigger a fan of the far left than I am the far right. I think they're both dangerous. And it would cause me great comfort to have both of them diminished or even removed, if possible, from the discourse of our society. Basically, what Aldean is saying here is that that kind of stuff, some of the acts that I mentioned there, that wouldn't go over well in a small town. So basically, he says in the video, you think you're pretty tough. Maybe that flies in the city, but that doesn't fly in a small town, so why don't you come and try it in a small town, and we'll see how far you get down the road, as the lyrics of the song indicate. And in fact, in the song he says, try that shit in a small town and see how far you get down the road.
Yeah, you think you're tough. Well, try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't.
It's a nice little, clever little thing, part of the song. Very appealing music-wise and very catchy. As I said, left-wing agitators kind of act like gasoline, throwing gasoline on a fire for these protests, and they sort of take over the protest, and so you kind of associate the violence with the Black Lives Matter movement or whatever the movement might be. These agitators come in and they throw shade on everybody there, whether there's a legitimate reason to protest or not. These guys go in and through their acts of violence, their agitation, their looting, looting actually crosses over into some of the citizens that are available there. Sort of a mob mentality breaks out in events like that, and when you see people smashing windows and walking off with merchandise from stores, it's the kind of thing where, you look around, you see everybody else doing it, and it's that, like I said, that mob mentality takes over, and away you go, and next thing you know, you're inside a camera store stealing a camera or whatever else might be there for the taking. So, to be honest, these guys, these left-wing agitators, could use a good old-fashioned, good old boy whooping, as far as I'm concerned. But if you were to lump them in, to be fair, if you were to lump in right-wing agitators with the left-wing agitators, then you've got yourself a warehouse-sized pack of whoop-ass that should be administered to all of these people. A pox on all of their houses is what I'm saying here. So it's too bad in the video. Now I understand where Aldean's coming from, and so legitimately so, he is just expressing the opinion that literally millions of people in America would share with him, but it would have been a more neutral piece of music and probably less prone to criticism had he included some examples of right-wing activities that have smeared society. How about the January 6th insurrection, for one? I know a lot of people in the States view that as, they view that in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of conspiracy theories around that, just like there is everything else, it seems. But showing scenes of that mob crashing into the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, that would have made it a little more credible, I think. What about the pictures that we've all seen of guys all dressed up in fatigues and camo, and they're all carrying automatic weapons, and they're standing out in front of the Michigan legislature to protest mask mandates as far as the COVID-19 thing? What about the pictures of the guys sitting on the tail end of their pickup trucks or in lawn chairs, just sort of sitting around within eyesight of polling stations or voting stations, again armed with automatic weapons. I mean, what's the point behind that? That's naked intimidation. That's voter intimidation. That's illegal. But because the Americans get all wrapped up in their right to possess firearms, they can literally walk around with lethal weaponry in the open, in public, and of course the message there is unmistakable. Now, if you were to challenge them, they would say that they're there to protect democracy, that they're there to protect the integrity of the voting process, when in actuality they're what's causing problems in the integrity of the voting process. And so, when you challenge people like that, they'll first give you a reason of why they're there. They're going to protect democracy from all of those who want to take it from us. This is the kind of rhetoric they use. And secondly, if none of that first stuff works, then they fall upon their constitutional rights. We're allowed to do this in America. It's our God-given right. And who are you to say otherwise? So, but, in fairness, it probably would have been better had there been examples of right-wing violence as well. But Aldean's a right-winger, so I can understand how he sort of has a bias towards left-wing violence. And he's not wrong. The left-wing violence has to stop. It really does. Extremism under any guise, whether it's left or right, has to be eradicated from society. It is a cancer upon our democracy and the way we live. Both sides will take people's anger, resentment, bitterness, anything that's got people all worked up, and they will use it and try and harness it for their own reasons. And a lot of times those reasons are to promote a sense of anarchy in democracy. And with an end view of trying to, possibly remove democracy or bring in a new kind of democracy, which is actually, not going to be very democratic at all, but more likely towards autocracy or totalitarianism or those sorts of things. This kind of stuff has happened over and over and over again in history, so, it's no big surprise to see it playing out on the streets of America. And so it's no big surprise to see it playing out in the popular culture of America and in popular songs from popular country music artists such as Jason Aldean. So anyways, he talks about in the video about how his granddaddy and his buddies' granddaddies, those granddaddies all gave their grandsons guns when they were growing up. And that was all part and parcel of growing up American.
That my granddad gave me. They say one day they're gonna round up.
But he doesn't really go into what are we going to do with these guns? I mean, is he suggesting here that anybody who is involved in the demographic that he's complaining about, the activists from the left wing, the people who are perpetuating the violence in the streets, is he advocating that we just up and shoot them? Or is this some sort of feedback or pushback against calls for gun control in the United States in the face of numerous mass shootings that have taken place this year already, and I believe, if not already passed, are approaching records for the numbers of gun violence and mass shootings in the United States in a calendar year. And we're only midway through July here. So maybe it's a little bit of pushback on that. So I'm not sure what the reference to granddaddy giving him a gun is. But either way, the first way is sort of lends credibility to the people who are saying that he's promoting vigilantism. And secondly, if that's not it, then it would certainly come to the attention of people who are interested in having increased measures for gun control in the United States. So he's definitely making a point there. I'm not sure which or both that he's actually making. It is important to note, though, that mass shootings take place not only in big cities, but they also take place in small towns. You could ask the people of Uvalde, Texas, or places in Rhode Island or Connecticut or small town America. Mass shootings have taken place regardless of the size of the community. So it's something that happens in both cities and small towns. By the way, I made I made reference to something called the Good Old Boys.
Try that in a small town full of good old boys, raised up right. If you're looking for a fight.
And he said, that small towns are populated by good old boys who were raised up right, and on he goes. And some people find that troubling because good old boys was a term, if I can put my quotation marks up here. Good old boys was a term that historically was associated with a group of people who were advocating lynching of black people. In fact, the courthouse that he filmed this in front of, or he's using as a backdrop, I'm not exactly sure which is the case, but that courthouse was the scene of I think, one of the last lynchings of a black person in Tennessee way back in 1927. I don't know if that was a fact that Aldean was aware of, but his use of the term "good old boys" raises a red flag with people who are thinking that this video might have a tinge of racism associated with it. Now, if you were to ask Aldean, and Aldean on social media has been very forthright in saying that none of this stuff was his intended, he didn't intend to promote vigilantism or racism or hatred or violence or gun use or any of those things. It was just a song, basically, and I can understand this. Stuff happening all over the place. We see it on the news. We're disgusted by it. It makes us afraid. And sometimes we get angry at that, and we sort of say to ourselves, if that happened in my town, or if that happened in a small town, well, it wouldn't happen in a small town because you'd see what would happen to you. And as Aldean says in the song, I don't recommend you come to a small town to find out. I get worked up by stuff like that when I see guys like Elliot McDavid out in Grand Prairie, Alberta, accosting Deputy Minister Krista Freeland, who's about half her size, and approaches her with his wife-beater t-shirt on and his happy-go-lucky wife who's only so happy to film it, and hurl all sorts of profanity and abuse at this unprotected woman half his size, and then get a big chuckle out of it afterwards, patting himself on the back for what a terrific piece of work that he's done. Well, he's a terrific piece of work, all right, and I have to say, sometimes I think myself that isn't that why God invented baseball bats for guys like Elliot McDavid? I also think back to, when I was younger, wasn't there somebody around who could keep people like that in check? Wasn't there somebody bigger, uglier, stronger around? Isn't there always somebody like that can keep the Elliot McDavids in check, to keep them accountable for actions like that? But in today's society, and of course what I'm saying is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's fine to get angry and it's fine to think like that, but it's another thing to actually act on it. And Aldean hasn't done anything any different from that. The only difference is I'm not a country music legend, and nobody buys anything that I produce, and nobody really listens to anything I have to say. Whereas with Aldean, he is a prominent figure in society. He does have a following, and who knows how many people might be motivated to take matters into their own hands, or how many people might have a certain point of view that when they see Aldean's songs and they look at his lyrics, they might think, wow, this guy's on my side. This is one of the good guys. He's validating the way that I think, and maybe it's a call to action. Actually, at the start of Aldean's video, in silhouette in the background, you see a guy. It's a silhouette of a guy with a baseball bat, and he is sort of brandishing it about, and the implication is clear, and that is that there's nothing in this world that a good old-fashioned whooping with a baseball bat can't fix, which of course is entirely inappropriate because it goes to the point that that's the promotion of violence to solve problems, especially political problems. The video does sort of give off the idea that vigilantism, taking matters into your own hands, is something that might be okay, especially if you're doing it against people who are abusing the symbols of power, abusing the symbols of the nation, like the flag. But he doesn't mention anything about people running around with flags with Donald Trump's picture on it, or flags with Trump's picture on it, and writing on it, or incendiary writing on it. Doesn't mention anything about, Canadian flags being flown upside down from pickup trucks. Doesn't mention anything about Canadian flags where somebody has very prominently scrolled "fuck Trudeau," who of course is the Prime Minister, on the flag. People who are driving around with ripped flags on their trucks. I mean, that's abuse of a national symbol. And I don't see any of that represented in Aldean's song here. I did mention that I like the song, right? So I'm sort of at cross purposes here because I think it's a good piece of music. I mean, it's a good song. It's not a nice song, but it's a good song. I just don't know about the messaging of it. And, I started this video probably thinking I was going to be more supportive, but as I hear myself rolling on here, I feel I'm starting to come more towards the viewpoint of some of the people who are critical of it. As I said, the whole baseball bat thing has entered my consciousness every once in a while, but it's not like I'm going to solve my problems by picking up a baseball bat and laying lumber down by swinging lumber, because whoever I'm swinging the lumber at's probably going to swing something at me. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to have a visit from the police and that whole process, which can be very uncomfortable and could probably wreck your weekend too if you had any plans. So I mean, I get the emotion that he's trying to convey here, but that said, I don't have a following. He does, and so that's the difference maker right there. But I mean, I totally understand what he's saying and the frustration that he's trying to articulate there. I started out being somewhat supportive. I kind of was thinking, boy, if he was anti-woke to begin with, he just brought a whole barrel of woke at him as a result of this piece of music. And in some cases, I was going to suggest that maybe some of the criticism goes a little far. Like, for example, one example of that would be the Good Old Boys. Now, do I really think that Jason Aldean is trying to suggest that it's cool to grab black people off the street and lynch them, have them swinging in the trees? Do I really think that that's part of what he's all about? I don't. If I'm wrong, okay. But I don't think I am. Who does that? Who's going to say that? Who's going to put that in a song, really? So I think that's kind of an overreach on the part of the people who are being critical. Like referring to oneself as a good old boy, to me that just makes it sound like you're the product of a small town. You're proud of that. Just like I would think that John Cougar Mellencamp, who sang about the small town experiences and was very much a small town artist in spirit, I wouldn't think that he would have any trouble considering himself to be a good old boy, not because he wants to see bodies swinging from ropes, but just because that's sort of a folksy way of sort of referring to oneself if one came from that kind of background. I guess on a rational and intellectual level, I have to admit that the song does contain some bothersome things. Maybe I'm looking too hard. I don't think I'm jumping on the bandwagon, but maybe I'm just putting too much scrutiny into this. Maybe at the end of the day, it's just a song. But in the current environment that we have, the hyper-political and hyper-partisan environment, not just in the United States, but here in Canada as well, you have to understand that people are going to jump all over that kind of thing. And I myself kind of was sort of proud of myself for not jumping all over it and being negative towards it at first blush. Like I said, it's a good song. But on an intellectual and practical level, I have to admit that some of the words, I can see how they have been taken the way that they are. I have suggested that perhaps showing some examples of right-wing activism and right-wing violence and right-wing agitation would have put it in balance. But that's not what Aldean is all about. Who knows? Maybe he supported January 6th. Maybe he supports people showing up at voting stations with automatic weapons. Who knows? But he left it one-sided. And I guess that's where his audience might be. To a degree, fair enough. I'm going to try not to be terribly critical of him. Like I said, good song, perhaps some unfortunate words. I live in a small town. I kind of get it, but I think that I would be the minority opinion in the small town that I live in. The opinion that I've expressed here. I think that my small town would probably be absolutely supportive of the messaging of Jason Aldean's song entitled "Try That in a Small Town." I understand that Jason Aldean is not from a small town. He was born in a city, and he's lived in cities ever since, none of them which would meet the threshold of a small town. But again, I think that's just me quibbling a little bit. It's not John Cougar Mellencamp, that's for sure. But in his own way, John Cougar Mellencamp didn't write music in a time of political upheaval such as what we're seeing today. So who really knows what he would say if he had a chance to do it all over again. We all know Jason Aldean's take, and so that's my take on Jason Aldean and this particular song, Try That in a Small Town. For Newsmag Renfrew, I'm Steve Jones.